Hi, my name is Jim Gibson. Thank you for joining me today on my channel. Very much appreciate it. Today I want to talk about public education. Now, in way of background, I need to explain, when I was in 10th grade, I could not read a newspaper. And so I needed to learn how to read. Now, one of the catalysts in my desire to learn how to read was the fact I just became a Christian at 16. And I decided I needed to read the New Testament. So I got a copy of the New Testament, probably made for second or third graders, I don't know. It was a paraphrase of the New Testament. It was simple English, simple language, simple words. And I started reading it. And when I came across a word that I didn't know, I would take that little Bible and I would take it to a friend or a relative or someone, and I would say, "What's this word? How do you pronounce it? Why do you pronounce it that way?" I would ask questions. And I learned phonics that way. They would teach me how to sound out words, and I'd write it down. I was very serious about this. I wanted to learn how to read. And I realized at that point in my life that if I was going to learn how to read, it was going to have to be my responsibility. Because I managed to get through 10 years in public education without knowing how to read a basic newspaper. So I read the whole New Testament that summer. When I got to the end of that summer, I went back to school, and you know what happened to my grades? They went fantastic. They went up. 2 years later, I went to college, and I finished college, Bachelor of Science degree. From there, I went on to the Marine Corps. I became a Marine Corps officer and a Marine Corps captain. And also, at the same time, the Marine Corps sent me back to school to get a master's in business administration. Really appreciate the Marine Corps. I loved being a Marine. After that, I moved back home, Oceanside, California. And when I moved back home, my kids, I have 4 kids, they were in public school at the time. And my oldest son came back and he had an A. And I said, "Hey, that's fantastic. Let's talk about your A." It's in history. And I said, "Great. Tell me about, what did you learn?" He said, "Well, I learned all about the Second World War, Dad." And I said, "Fantastic, son. This is great. Tell me about the Second World War, would you please?" And he kind of struggled with talking to me. And I said, "Well, tell me about the Nazis." And he said, "Nazis, I heard that name before." I said, "Well, you got an A. What do you mean you know that word before? You should know everything about them if you're going to study the Second World War." And he said, "Well, I'm sorry. I did the best I could." And I said, "Well, tell me, what side were the British on? Were they on our side or were they on the Nazi side?" And he said, I don't know." And I said, "Well, son, how can you get an A in this and not know these things?" And I said, "Well, let's talk about Japan." And he said, "Absolutely." I said, "Tell me about Japan's involvement in the Second World War." And he said, "Dad, I can tell you all about that. They have wonderful gardens and they're really nice people." And I said, "Well, how about their involvement in the Second World War?" And he said to me, "Well, Dad, we're the only country that ever dropped a bomb on humans, the atomic bomb, and we killed hundreds of thousands of people." And I was kind of taken back. And I said, "Well, there's more to that argument than that statement." I said, "Do you realize your grandfather was slated to go to Japan? He was pulled out of Europe and on his way to Japan, and it was going to be a nasty fight, and he may not have survived if they didn't drop that bomb on Japan. Hey, by the way, son, how about Pearl Harbor? Did you know anything about Pearl Harbor?" He didn't know much about Pearl Harbor. In fact, I don't think he said he knew anything about it. So I decided that summer what I would do is I would sit down with my kids, all 4 of them, and we'd go through all 20th century American history. Each president, their philosophy, what they have accomplished, where their failures were. Each war, First World War, Second World War, Vietnam War, we went through all of them. Korea War, went through all of them. And the history behind all these things. History of the United States. And I started thinking, why do I have to do this with my kids? And that was the second summer in a row that I had to teach my kids, reteach my kids on subjects. And I decided this is unacceptable. I don't want my kids to go through school like I did, not knowing how to read and not having someone to help them, teach them about the things that are important in life. About history. You got to know history. You got to know how to read. Once you know how to read, you actually don't need anyone else helping you. You could read history yourself, but it's really nice that if you're going to spend all these hours in class, that you actually learn something, something that's going to help you in life. And if you learn history, then you can learn where you're at in history. You can learn the significance of the things, the difference between the free market and socialism and communism, and why communism and socialism is bad and will actually make you poorer and hurt your future. And none of that was taught to my kids, and that's what they needed to learn. So I pulled them out of public school, and I put them in a private school. Now, this was a co-op private school. Parents did the teaching. Nobody had teaching credentials. But you know what happened? My kids, who had to take a test every year with the state, did fantastic. Each year they grew and grew and grew. They went on to college and did fantastic. And now they're in life. They have some really significant jobs and they're doing great. But that's not good enough for me. I thought, you know, if this is not good enough for my kids, this public school system, then it's not good enough for yours, and I need to be involved. So back then, I spent 20 years on the Vista School Board. I got back involved. I decided I was going to run for the school district. I was going to run for trustee, to be on that board, and to make the right decisions to support this community and these kids. And you know something? That was a tough race. I self-funded. Being a businessman, I had enough money in my account to take my personal funds. I didn't get a penny from anyone else. I took my personal funds and I paid for everything I needed to run that race, and I came in number one. So I have a significant background and a purpose and a direction. So when I talk about public education, I'm going to be talking from that background, from my experience, 20 years on the Vista School Board. And I'm going to tell you what I think is wrong and where the problems are in public education and how we can turn it around and how we should turn it around. I mean, for crying out loud, we're spending billions and billions of dollars statewide for public education. When I was first on the Vista School Board, I think our budget was $135 million. When I left, it was close to $300 or $400 million. I don't remember. To tell you the truth, it's been about 5 years since I've been on that board. When we started, we had 28,000 students. When I left, it was 21,000 students. And we still had the money was just increasing faster than inflation. Well, what's going on? How come the scores keep on going down, going down, going down? And as I researched, and I already knew why back then, even before I ran, I knew what was going on. But this confirmed it to me, you know, living it every single day, was that the teachers' union, not the teachers, but the teachers' union was in charge of education. I'll give you an example. After being on the board for a couple years, the union wants to talk to each trustee, and they've been avoiding me, and I kind of embarrassed them in public. One of the board meetings, I said, I notice you've taken out the other 4 people to dinner and stuff like that. When are you guys going to take me to dinner? Well, they got embarrassed. They called me up the next day and they said, when would you like to go to dinner? And I said, X day, or I don't know what day it was. Let's do it. And they said, okay, fantastic. So we got together at dinner and we started talking. And I said, I'd like to know your concerns. And they told me this concern, that concern. We need more money. We need this. We need that. And I said, you know something? You guys just about control the whole district. You control everything. And you know something? I want to ask you, you gather all this money, $1,000 per teacher, over $1,000 per teacher per year, and yet you spend 90% of that on politics. I said, you send money to the governor's race, significant amounts, assembly races. You send money to all sorts of officials. In fact, you funded all my opponents, and significantly. How about these propositions that you keep on funding? No one else would fund them, to be honest with you. They wouldn't even pass without the money that you provide. Most elected officials in California would not be in their elected seat unless the California Teachers Association gave them significant amounts of money, probably more than any other organization. They really pump out the dollars on the political side. So I said, I got one question. And they said, what? I said, you support all these policies. Have you ever asked the teachers what they want supported? And I remember these two guys looked at each other, back and forth. And they said, no, we know what they want. And I said, no, you don't, because you've never asked. I said, you're taking all their money and you're running political campaigns of people that they may not even support. And yet each year you raise their dues. And does the dues help my teachers? And I remember them saying to me, your teachers? They're my teachers. I said, no, they're forced to join your union. They work for me at their free will. And I am the trustee that makes sure that they get paid. I said, you don't pay, you take. And I said, these are my teachers. And they didn't like that answer. I said, so when are you going to ask them? It's kind of simple. Propositions are coming up this year. Why don't you write out the proposition? Why don't you send it to them and say, do you want us to support it or not support it? And they kind of said, no, we're not going to do that. And I said, oh, I understand. Because you know that most teachers wouldn't support the nonsense that you support with their money. And there's no reason why you should be taking that amount of money out of the hands of my teachers. If you left them keep that money, and they could, for 20 years, put that money in the bank, they'd have enough money to send their kids to college. Well, maybe not today, because colleges are going crazy with the costs. But they would have enough money. Now, why do I say there's a problem with the union? Well, the problem with the union has been taken over by people that call themselves progressive. Now, progressive is a really fancy word, isn't it? It's really just a euphemism for socialism. That's all it is. There's no progress there. When you look at people who run different cities like Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, federal government, you see it's all failing. It's a failure, and it keeps on failing and failing and failing. What they call progressive, let's call it what it is. The socialists are killing our country. And they're not only killing our country, they're killing public education. Now, how could one union possibly kill public education? Well, I have a solution I'm going to be talking about at the end on how to turn this around. But the union is against success. Now, how can you say that? Well, I say that is because we had the most improved middle school in the state of California when I was on the school board. They were fantastic. We had the great principal. Principal was able somehow get certain teachers into her school and get other teachers out of the school. And these teachers really were just loving education. So they wanted to do everything they possibly could to get the kids to succeed. And because of that, and this was one of the worst schools in our system. By the way, none of the administrators really cared about that. But this principal turned it around. The scores went crazy. The teachers were doing a fantastic job. And one day I got a call from the principal and the teachers. And they said, Jim, is it possible we could talk to you? And I said, yeah, let's come on by my office. I got a big conference room. All the teachers came. Principal was there. And some of the teachers started crying. And I said, what are you crying about? And they said, they're trying to shut down our school. They're actually, the union reps are coming right in the middle of our classroom and making it difficult for us to manage our classrooms. They're doing everything they can for us to change. They say it's not fair to the other teachers in the district that they're doing so well than the other teachers. Well, the principal kicked out the union reps out of the school, said they were forbidden to come back into that school. That school was fantastic. It was succeeding. It was innovative. It was successful. You know, in public education, one of the things I often hear, which is kind of funny, is I get these administrators that would come forward and I would say, how come there's a problem here? How come we're not doing better in reading? How come we're not doing better in math? Things like that. And they would say, well, you know, Trustee Gibson, we are trying the best we can, and we're really adding rigor and all this other stuff. And finally I got to the point where I said, I'm tired of hearing how hard your job is. You are paid to bring success, and you are not doing it. One of the areas that I pushed them in was teaching Hispanic kids to speak English, those new arrivals who were on our school system. I remember one time we had a meeting, a school board meeting, and in the school board meeting, the assistant superintendent, oh gosh, we had so many assistant superintendents. I think we had more of them than we had teachers. But we had the assistant superintendent come forward and he talked that we have 35 language groups. I said, fantastic. Tell me a language group that's not learning or is learning English but is not from a Spanish background. And the guy got all proud. Yes, we had 2 Russians. And I said, well, fantastic. How are the Russians doing in English? He said, it's amazing. In 1 year, they didn't know anything about English. By the end of the year, they were functional in a classroom. And I remember saying to him, oh, you don't believe that the Spanish-speaking Hispanic kids can't do the same? And he said, why do you say that? I said, because you're telling me it takes 6 years for them to transition into English. That's unacceptable. You're not serving the taxpayers because you're taking too long, and you're not serving those children. You need to teach them English within 2 years. And they all fought it and everything else. Became a big issue in the school district. Make a long story short, that was the standard after that. Once it started succeeding and I was near the end of my time there at the Vista School District, I figured 20 years on this board was enough for me. And at the end, one of the superintendents, I think it was him, came up and he said, Mr. Gibson, I need to apologize. I didn't think it was possible. He said, but you're absolutely right. It is possible that you can teach English, functional English in a classroom within 1 year. And 2 years is definite. I won on that. But to make a long story short, you don't get on the board most likely unless you're supported by the teachers union. The teachers union experts in campaigning, the teachers union money that's needed for a campaign. Yes, it takes money to buy those yard signs. It takes money to send out those mailers. You don't know who you can even vote for unless they have the yard signs and the mailers. And everyone thinks it's wonderful when you hear, I'm endorsed by the teachers. No, they're not endorsed by the teachers. They're endorsed by the teachers union. Teachers can decide for themselves. But in this case, it's the teachers union. And people who aren't paying attention during campaigns would say, oh, the teachers support this person, I must support them. And in reality, what they're doing is they're hiring union reps to decide how to spend the money and what's going to be taught in the classroom. Rather than teach English, rather than teach how to read and write, the math, the sciences, and stuff like that, what they're doing is they're talking about diversity. They're talking about LGBTQ, whatever else it is. They're talking about all those things. And they're anti, most of the time, not all of them, most of the time, they're anti-family and they're anti-parents. And I remember one time I said to one of the representatives, I call them, the trustees they call themselves, but they were named trustees, but they were basically representatives from the teachers union. I said, you're called a trustee, right? I said, what does that mean? And they said, well, we're here to support, we're supposed to take care of the teachers. They didn't quite know. And I said, I can tell you clearly what that means. You're entrusted by the taxpayers of this district to run this school in such a way that benefits the parents. That's it, just the parents. It's not here to, I'm pro-teacher. We had some fantastic teachers, and often they were held back by the teachers union because they were embarrassing people. But we had some fantastic teachers, but we have a lot that weren't fantastic, and they are employees. They are not God-sent angels, okay? Some of them really work hard, like that most improved school in the state of California. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned, they shut it down and they spread out all the teachers. They closed that building and they turned it into an office space for better education improvements and things like that. They destroyed one of the best schools we had because they didn't like the fact that it was interfering with other teachers in the district that could not produce like they could. And don't tell me that they handpicked the kids. They didn't. These were the poorest section of our district. And they took these very poor kids. A lot of their parents didn't even finish high school. And they took these groups of kids and they moved them tremendous growth in 1 and 2 years. By the third year, the school was shut down, the principal was fired, and teachers were scattered throughout the district. And you'd say, well, you know, that happens sometimes. Well, it's happened more than once. I remember another time in a middle school, Lincoln Middle School, we had 4 teachers get together, and they said, you know, we have some kids that are struggling to learn the subject matter, and we have others that are bored because we're going so slow teaching these kids, the slower kids. So they decided amongst themselves, and was approved by the principal, that 2 teachers would take all the classes with the kids that were struggling. They just enjoyed helping those type of kids. The other 2 said they would go with the kids that wanted more homework, more rigor. I hate to use that word, but more difficulty to learn more. They were hungry. They were bored with the other guys, but they were hungry to learn more. And so the teachers, the 2, especially those who were going to teach the kids that wanted to learn more, went to the parents and said that we want your son, your daughter in our classes. It's going to be tougher than what they're used to. They want to be in this class, but we don't want to do that unless you approve. And the parents overwhelmingly agreed to that program. And that program did fantastic, did great for many, many years. And then the union trustees, the other 4 trustees on the board, shut it down. And again, the same purpose, made other teachers look bad. They were doing great for both groups. For the struggling group was doing better, and the advanced group was doing fantastic. And I remember the media came to me, and live on TV, I was out front of the school with parents, and they came to me and they said, Jim, a lot of union reps are saying that you're a racist. I said, oh, yeah. And they said to me, is this only for elite kids? I said, no, it is not only, it's for all kids in that school. And again, that was not a great area in the Vista School District. And I said, you know, 60% of the kids there are Hispanic. And I think it was 10% are black. I said, so it leaves very few that are white. So how am I a racist? So point made. So some of the ways you can improve public school system. Now, if you're a teacher, hang on, okay? Hear me to the end here. If you're a conservative teacher, get involved in the union. Stop this nonsense stuff that's going on. It's your union. You're paying them $1,000 a year or more. So why don't you get in and do something? A trustee can only do so much. And most trustees are losers, okay, in school systems in California. Most of them in the education system who are managing these things, a state superintendent of public education, he's put there by the teachers union. Most of the trustees are put there by the teachers union. The superintendents, the people that come up through the ranks aren't going to come up through the ranks unless the teachers union likes them or agrees with them, or they follow the rules of the teachers union. So the first thing you got to do is we got to get conservative teachers in the union. You got to be part of it. You got to commit yourself to this. Most teachers don't want to get involved in politics. And if the union says this candidate is bad, this one is good, they're going to vote for the one that the union tells them to vote for, because really their focus is on teaching kids, and that's all they want. But if you want to make the public school system better, then you got to get some really good people in the union. I don't, you know, you're not going to do away with the union. Let's get some decent people in there. The ones that are in there now controlling it, they're progressives. Remember what progressives means? It means socialists. And their programs, no matter where you go, are failures. You look at New York City, what clowns are in New York City? Unbelievable clowns. What clowns are running Chicago? It's getting worse in Chicago. Philadelphia, I always like Philadelphia because that's where I'm from. What a bunch of idiots running that city. We can talk about that another day because I have a lot of experience with Philadelphia. But the bottom line is you need good people elected, good people within the system, the union system. Bring it back to a better system. Now, next thing is competition. Public school systems need competition. They need to be able to say, you as a parent need the school system to be competitive and you need to stand up for your children. So if one school is better than another, then you need to get your kid in that better school. And one of the things that I asked was that we open enrollment, that all our schools are open and anybody can have their kid go to that school, whatever school they pick. And what would happen is if all the parents were sending their kids to one school, the other schools better get their act together or they're going to lose teachers and employees. That's competition. Competition always produces a better result. That's what the free market's about. I think that's probably the best you can do in public education, run by the government. I just remember my dad when I was growing up would say to me often, he would say, anything the government does that can be done by the private sector, it's always going to be twice as expensive and half as efficient. And that's absolutely true of public education. It needs competition to make it better. If you love public education, of course, I don't know why you listened this far on to my discussion. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of messages on my YouTube account. If you love public education, then ask for competition. Everywhere you can possibly be. Teachers competing against teachers, schools competing against schools, public competing against the private industry. And with that in mind, I'm going to do another video on what's happening in Texas, how they're trying to shift the money to the student and the parent rather than the school. So the parents decide that if you don't provide for my child and train my child, then we're going to take our money out. So you're going to vote with your dollars and we're going to go to another school that will better serve my kids. Man, the public education system is failing our families, failing our children. It's a poor education and it's a waste of time. So you need that competition, you need to get good people in the union, you need to have that good competition there to make things better, and we can turn this around. But if it doesn't turn around, then we need the parents to have the vote, and that's the vote with the dollar. They need to get the dollar that is being spent on their child, and they need to decide where that dollar should go. Hey, listen, if you love what I'm saying, comment, give me a thumbs up, subscribe. If you hate what I'm saying, well then send me your nasty messages, okay? I'm happy with it. You're not going to hurt my feelings, and I'm a big guy. I can handle your complaints. I have thought through enough my position that I know how to defend it, and I've heard the other side many times, but I'm always interested in new ideas. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, give me a thumbs up. You have a wonderful day.